Hi guys, this is our lesson on what is sculpture. Our objectives are identify different types of sculpture in art and its characteristics, and then identify the different types of methods and techniques for creating sculpture. So our words worth knowing is sculpture. Sculpture is a three-dimensional form created by carving, modeling, construction, or assembling materials. The word sculpture comes from the Latin word sculpere, which means to cut or remove pieces with a stone. So what we're looking at is 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions. So in 2-dimensional work, we have a height and length, we have a width and breadth. But in 3-dimensional work, we have a height and length, we have a width and breadth, but we also have depth and volume added. So we can also have the ability to move around our pieces. So the characteristics of sculpture are one that it occupies space is actually there. It can be representational or abstract. It can be a solid mass or capable of movement. It can be carved, modeled, casted, constructed, or assembled. So sculptural forms, there's 2 basic types. We have sculpture in the round, which is freestanding and viewed from many sides, so you can actually get up and walk around it. You can see it from all angles. And then there's relief. So there's raised relief where it has a background and then the sculpture comes off of the background. And then there's sunken relief where there's a background and then there's carving below the level of the surface. So there's high relief where you have your sculpture coming out of the background, like almost like in the round but not. And then low relief is when it's pretty close to the surface. So this would be an example of sculpture in the round. You could get up and move around this sculpture and see it from all angles. And then this is a very high relief. So these figures come out from the background, but there is a background. So there is no back to look at in this sculpture. So a couple more types. There's kinetic, which are sculptures that move around, so they can contain moving parts or move. So this is an example of a mobile that would be hung from the ceiling that moves around. And then an assemblage. So an assemblage is arranging or grouping together found objects, whether related or unrelated, and then arrange them into a surrounding surface. So this is an example of an assemblage piece. So one more type, which is more contemporary, is an installation. So an installation is a form of 3D work that is often created within a space, thinking about the space in mind to transform it, or it's a type of sculpture that is put in a specific area to interact with that space. So if you've ever been to Chicago, the Bean is a really good example of an installation piece. So most traditional sculptures are created by 2 methods or processes. One is additive. So think additive add. You're involving adding or building up of material to create the sculpture surface. And then subtractive, so subtracting. So subtractive sculpture, you're taking away, removing material to create the sculpture or the finished product. So this would be additive, since he's adding all these little glass pieces into a frame to create the sculpture, where this sculpture is the Pietà by Michelangelo. Of course, it's one of my favorites. He had a block of marble and he was carving out the surface to create this piece. And a famous quote that's attributed to him is, "I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free." So he saw this in the marble and carved it out. So creating sculpture, we have all these processes that we have, the additive, the subtractive. So from these 2, think of it like as a little tree branch. You can create using these 5 methods. So we have 2 different big overall processes, and then there's about 5 methods to create sculpture. So one's carving. Carving is a subtractive process. So you want to remove material to create a finished piece of artwork. It's mainly wood, stone, marble, those types of hard materials. You can also use plaster, soap, and clay to carve from. And then here's another example of Bernini sculpture. So I am a fan of Renaissance sculpture, Italian Renaissance sculpture. Next is modeling. So modeling is an additive process. So these type of materials are soft and workable. So think about clay, you're adding when you're creating a clay sculpture. Plaster, you can use plaster to be an additive type of sculpture. Wax, paper mache. So here's an example of a folk art sculpture that's made out of paper mache where you're adding to create it. Then casting. Casting is also another additive process. So you're using a type of mold, and then you're filling the mold with either bronze, any kind of metal. You can do a slip mold, concrete, plaster, and then the material will harden in the mold, and then you will have what is called your cast. The oldest and most common thing to cast is bronze. So here's an example of a cast bronze sculpture. So he created a mold, and then bronze was poured in the mold, and this is what is left. So it's a multi-step process. And then we have construction. So construction, another additive process. So using solid materials, foam, wood, glass, metal, plexiglass, cardboard, fabric. And then you manipulate your material, cutting, welding, and then you assemble that sculpture at the end. So you can think about nailing things together, gluing with cardboard. You do different types of tabs, rivets, welding. So you are really, what it sounds like, constructing and building that piece. So here is Picasso's Cubist sculpture of a guitar, which is made out of metal and wire. And then last we have assemblage, another additive. So this, we're finding objects, could be related, unrelated, and assembling them together as a whole piece. So this is a Joseph Cornell shadow box. So you can see he's adding things into this box to create his sculpture. So found objects. All right, so I'd like you to check your notes off with me before you move on to the next thing. And then make sure that I've checked it off and you got your sticker. Good job.